Hey, folks, welcome to Mac and Mike. I'm Mac and he's Mike. You can always tell the difference. I'm the handsome, debonair, and good looking one, and well, he's Mike.
Yeah.
So, anyways, we didn't have one subject that we thought was worth the whole thing, the whole period, the whole conversation this morning. So, we thought we would touch on a couple of subjects, and I don't know what Mike has on his agenda. I've got a couple of things in particular. Um, we had wanted to get together this week. We missed last week, so it's been a little bit of a bear. I've got some unusual circumstances with care for an aging father, and we both have family things that are going on. It's Easter. Tomorrow is Easter, so let me wish everyone a happy Easter. He is risen indeed, and because he did what he did, we have hope for life everlasting. Whosoever eat of this flesh will never die. Right, Mike?
Amen to that.
Amen, brother. So, look, the first thing I'd like to talk about is a text message that I sent to Mike about a video that I saw on the Rubin report. I don't know, it was a week ago or so. And Mike, I'm sure because he's so damn good at everything he does and so detail oriented, I'm sure Michael put a link to this particular video, YouTube short, I think it was, where a young woman by the name of Lucy Lee, who was a Democratic operative and part of Anita Dunn's team, a little bit upset about some of the things that have come out that have been reported after the end of the Biden administration and the beginning of the second term for the Trump administration. And she's made some startling accusations. And what I find so unusual about her startling accusations is that she's the only person I hear talking about it. Now, I don't know if this is true or not because it's very easy to make a claim and sometimes very hard to prove. But it's clear to me that the Democrat political class does not want this story to get out. What story am I talking about? Well, according to the interview that Rubin did with Lucy Lee, is that there was a staff of people that were making decisions for then President Joe Biden. He was so incapacitated, and Jill Biden was so insistent on not allowing her husband to step down as president, they created a group of people who became, in effect, the three-headed president of the United States. And that was a woman by the name of Anita Dunn, who still is very important in Democratic politics, a guy by the name of Mike Donnell, and a guy by the name of Steve Fischetti. Now, I don't know if those three people were actually making the decisions that the president should have been making. It's not me saying that. It is Lucy Lee saying that. And what I find so hard to believe is she was in a position to know, and yet this startling revelation has not been picked up by any of the major news networks and discussed. Now, I understand you can't go backwards in history and change things, but if that in fact is true, that because the president was incapacitated and the duties of the president passed to three unelected individuals who were then making all the decisions for the president. Number one, shouldn't the American people know that? Number two, shouldn't the government of the United States make some sort of policy decision to prevent something like this happening in the future? And I know there's the 25th Amendment, which is the way that you ordinarily would remove an incapacitated president. But if so many people knew about this, why did no one do anything about it? And I don't know, Mike. Do you think there's a third and fourth reason why we ought to expose and to discuss this set of circumstances?
I don't know. I think the president's office is very insulated. Number one, typically, And there are people that crave power and they think, I mean, I'm not even accusing them of, you know, anything dastardly in the sense that they're evil people because they may be evil people, but they actually believe they're doing the best thing they can do. So, you know, that's the difference. You know, I'm sure Charles Manson thought he was doing the best he could too, right? So that doesn't excuse bad behavior.
There are those who would tell you that Adolf Hitler was, he thought he was doing the right thing too.
Yeah, all the Stalin, all the evil people, Mao
Oh,
Zedong,
yep.
Pol
Oh,
Pot, go down the list. And, so it has, I think, a lot to do with self deception. I think it has a lot to do with craving power. One of the sins, greed. They want it for themselves, whatever that thing is. So I don't know how we could prevent it. How that's the question. How do you pass a law that makes people tell the truth? I don't know.
maybe what you do is you implement penalties for people who do what Lucy Lee is accusing Anita Dunn, Mike Donald, and Steve Freschetti of doing. Maybe you institute penalties so that, when the wife of a president refuses to admit his disability, maybe you put in some sort of penalty so that there are some negatives that accrue to people that deceive the American people at this level. I know that there are people who will tell you that FDR's wife did the same thing while he was declining in health. There are those that will tell you that Mrs. Reagan did the same thing while she was while Ronald Reagan was suffering from dementia. And I'm not saying that any of these actions are criminal. What I am saying is that there are certain powers that are reserved to the President of the United States that the people of the United States invest in that person, that president. For example, how many pardons were given in the last couple of weeks of the president's administration? Were those pardons that were truly given by the President of the United States? Or were those pardons instituted by this tabletop group of three usurpers who supposedly were making these decisions? And if they were, are those pardons even valid? Are they legal? Are they responsible? Should they be revoked? Should there be any consideration of whether or not they should be revoked?
Well, the problem is what you outlined earlier. It's proving it. You have it's like you'd have to have a criminal lawsuit and bring people up to testify and put them on under oath. And while I agree that it'd be great, I just don't think there's enough willingness in the Washington cabal to actually implement something because it could, have ramifications in a lot of different ways. They could be investigating every president. They would probably take it beyond its intended purpose. It's just like since 9/11, we have Homeland Security, and it was there for a reason, but we've sort of extended it, beyond its original purpose. And that's the negative side of all this, you know.
I'm not even sure that I'm looking for punishment of those people who did this in the past. It may be that those three people did the best job that they could, given the circumstances that the president was incapable of acting on his own. But what I am saying is that should we consider preventing this kind of circumstance occurring in the future? Is there some way, for example, let's just say, and I don't know that this is the right answer, just spitballing, as they say, when you're brainstorming. Let's just say that a majority of the Supreme Court would say this person is not capable, is no longer capable of serving as president of the United States. We demand, majority of the Supreme Court we demand that the cabinet investigate the 25th Amendment to determine if, and at that point in time, there can be a medical evaluation, medical and psychological evaluation of the president at the point that the majority of the Supreme Court asked for it. Or maybe it's the majority of the Senate. I know that the House of Representatives has the power to impeach. Um, I don't know that because the House of Representatives is a shorter term and there's more people. I think they do more politically biased things. I think the Senate is a more deliberative body. So the in these circumstances, the Biden, the Reagan, the FDR circumstances, should there be some organization with oversight that says the president is no longer capable of doing his job? I think the Supreme Court is a would be a non-biased potential, or the U.S. Senate, or maybe there could be some other group of people that are established. Because right now the cabinet with the 25th Amendment is not working. Because we have multiple examples of it not working.
Yeah, well, my first thought is the Supreme Court, number one, is political and is biased. I mean, we see that on its decisions. Let's not fool ourselves. They're not supposed to be, but they are. Or at least they're driven by ideology, that maybe each judge doesn't recognize themselves as being biased, but you can tell by the outcomes. Don't watch what people say, watch what they do. And the evidence is clearly there when you have split decisions that are political in nature. Now, instead of having the Senate, because I don't trust the Senate either. Look, you got guys like Chuck Schumer. They're all very political. They're not, the Senate is no longer, in my opinion, the deliberative body that it used to be. It's become hyper polarized. They all stick together. Just look at the votes again.
Yeah.
The Lake and Riley bill, the keeping women out of men out of women's sports, fell in the Senate across party lines. It's ridiculous because it's an 80-20 issue. Most Americans, so it just shows that the Senate is no better than the House of Representatives at this point, or a little better. So what I would suggest simply is a panel of doctors, not just one. Every year, the president should not just get a physical, but a psychological evaluation. And I don't know where you pull that panel of doctors from. You have to, again, be careful that those doctors are not, politically driven because, hey, doctors have political views. Everyone has political views.
Sure.
So, maybe there's a multi-tiered level of psychological evaluation. So, say a panel of 3 doctors says X, Y, and Z, and then it's outsourced to a random pool of doctors for verification. Just like you would do with the double-blind test, with something like that.
I guess, Mike, that I'm disturbed to find out after the fact that there was this group of 3 people who, in effect, were the president of the United States, and they were not elected. I guess I feel a little bit different about Mrs. Reagan and a little bit different about Mrs. Roosevelt. And there were some rumors about Mrs. Wilson too. So I'm not sure that, there aren't some fully, my father has dementia. And there are times when he's fully functional, fully capable, remembers everything and is fine. There are other times when he can't remember his name and he can't remember where he lives. He doesn't know how old he is. He thinks he's still in the army. So there's a lot of these things that, a husband and wife can talk about during lucid moments that maybe she knows enough about to steer him in the right direction. But I am concerned about an unelected group of people acting as the president. And in order for that kind of thing to happen, multiple people would know about it. And I guess what I'm looking for is there needs to be some way of punishing those people who are aware of it and do nothing about it. because those people that are directly involved have little, if any, incentive to rat out the disabled president because they're the ones in power, and so I don't know. It to me is a big deal. Maybe it won't be a big deal to other people.
Well, in Joe Biden's particular case, he got elected during COVID. So normally the US voting public would have had an opportunity
The
to
vet,
see debates and hear a person speak. He basically hid in his basement,
yep,
had a couple of videos, and really what got Joe Biden elected, I think, was because Trump was so bombastic, during his first, presidency, and people just wanted the drama to stop. They didn't,
mean tweets. That's right, mean tweets. We
yeah,
don't want any more of those mean tweets.
you're right. And in all honesty, it worked. This worked out for the best. There's a Bible verse since it's Easter Sunday. Uh, Satan means it for evil, and God means it for good. So if you look at this situation, yeah, Joe Biden hurt America, but it's kind of like Jimmy Carter. It resulted in a long period of positive growth because sometimes America needs shaken and wakened up to
Yeah,
see that we're, going off a cliff.
yeah.
So, and also the assassination attempt, as Satan means that for evil, God meant it for good because you can tell it changed Trump's personality
Yes, it did.
and in a good way. So I think, 2020 hindsight, whatever happened in the past has led to some good.
Talking about good, Mike, did you see the article that I sent you from the Department of Defense about the reinstitution of the Army caisson uh, service at Arlington Cemetery?
Yeah, and I replied to you about it. It's just, yeah, horses need a lot of care.
Well, I guess the point that I wanted to talk about as far as being good, now it hasn't reinstituted yet, but shortly after Easter it will. Uh, in the past, when someone was buried at Arlington Cemetery, they brought the coffin out to the burial site by an old fashioned horse drawn caisson, which is truly a military burial. They typically have black horses. If you remember seeing the pictures of the JFK funeral procession back in the '60s, it's the same kind of thing. It's black horses with a black carriage with a coffin on the back, a soldier in dress blues that's driving or riding the caisson, and there's typically an honor guard with it. And it is a very, very meaningful and honor filled tribute to the fallen hero because, at this point in time, the people who are being buried in Arlington, it used to be just about any soldier, sailor, airman, and marine could be buried there. Now they have because of the limited space, they have pretty strict entrance requirements. You have to have served in battle. You have to have served. You have to receive certain kind of military recognition or a certain rank. I think that that's disappointing that the caisson was ended. The caisson service it used to be the old part of the old guard, and it was stopped. It was stopped being part of the um, burial practice of our heroes back in 2023, and this year it'll come back in full force. And it talks a little bit about the mistakes made in the past, and how they have these people who are equestrian experts. How they used to be, there used to be horses that were kept in a small area at Fort Belvoir. I was stationed at Fort Belvoir for a while. Um, and now they have a deal of some kind with a 50-acre horse farm where they're going to keep the horses. And they said in the old days when they needed horses, they would go out and buy 10 horses at the same time. So they'd buy 10 4-year-old horses. And of course, what that meant is that all the horses were getting old and decrepit at the same time. So now they're resourcing their animals in a different way, and actually created an SOP. I was shocked to learn there was never a standard operating procedure for the caisson service, and they're now calling it the caisson platoon. So, I don't want to spend too much time on it because it's on one side morbid, but on the other side, I think it's stupid that we allowed that practice to halt, to stop being an honor for our heroes. But the most important thing is it's being reinstituted. I don't know whether to give the Trump administration credit for it or not, but I do give the military credit for it. I do think that recognizing our heroes in that way is an important element of our society. Those nations that will endure are those nations that honor their heroes. And I truly believe that. And without honoring our heroes, there will not be future heroes. And without future heroes, there will not be a nation. So it's good news. I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
Not really. I mean, I did work with horses for quite a number of years, or no, not quite a number, a couple of years, 3 maybe. And I read the article understanding what horses need, and thoroughbreds especially. But these horses are prized horses, and they're trained. And yes, they finally put a budget, committed budget, I think, of $5 million a year towards it. And they have now hired experts and made it an MOS they call it in the Army.
Yes.
So it didn't used to be a career field. So it was a 4-year tour of duty. And it's like, no, you need to keep people that understand how to treat horses in line to take proper care of them. And they changed the caisson too, so it's lighter weight. It looks different underneath the carriage now. Everything on top looks the same. But yeah, they had to modernize the whole thing. Every beast of burden gets tired, Bible talks about that too. Don't muzzle the ox while it treads out the grain. You got to care for your animals, and they just weren't doing the right thing.
Yeah, yeah. Well, whatever was done in the past, I do agree it needs to be done in a proper fashion, in a humane fashion, and an honorable fashion. The whole thing is to honor our heroes. And what they said was that there would be, up to 2 caisson funerals a day, and all 7 days a week, so that there would be as many as 14 of those in a week. I don't know that we have that many people being buried in Arlington Cemetery. I only know a couple of my friends who qualified to be buried in Arlington Cemetery. I mean, every military person has the opportunity to be buried in a military cemetery. And I know a lot of veterans who are buried right near us at the National Cemetery at Fort Indiantown Gap. But, being buried in Arlington Cemetery truly is a distinguished honor. And I'm glad they're bringing it back so that they give all the honors that our heroes are due for their service and their sacrifice. So, what else we want to talk about, Mike? Should we talk about the region or the recency bias that we talked about the other day? Some of our friends are picking up news articles, or they're picking up news on the internet and without questioning, without doing research. And I know that blows you away because you research everything. But all of a sudden they start believing these things and repeating them as if they're facts.
Yeah, I mean, okay, so after Facebook kicked me off for Vets for Trump, I got discouraged and I left for a number of years. And I mean, again, it was unjustified. But I went back to Facebook, just to check on some, military buddies and friends.
Yeah.
Well, all of a sudden, our friend Brent, as soon as he knows I'm back on Facebook, he starts sending me all these links. And now they have something called Reels, which is short videos like YouTube Shorts. But he sends me all this stuff. There's no context. There's no textual link. Like when we do a video, and if it's controversial, in the blog post, I'm going to put a link so people can see. So I told all these guys, Joe is sort of similar, Brent and Joe. And I said, look, guys, just go grok it. That's grok.com. And they just won't do it. And the reason I said use Grok over ChatGPT is Grok has current information up to the minute. The others don't.
Yeah.
So if you're looking for verification of something, you need to go to something that has now current access to everything in the web. So time after time, it's something about UFOs, or it's even something about religion, or it's something about ancient history, or politics. And every conspiracy theory under the sun. We were involved in 9/11. We did that to ourselves. Oh my God. The towers didn't fall because of the airplane, but because of an internal demolition. So and so says we have aliens at Area 51. Just you go down this crazy list. And I pointed out to, I'll just say I pointed out to my friend Brent a few of the things he said to me. If you look at the textual description, it says created by artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
But he believed it was real.
Yeah. My brother's like that. My brother calls me up and he'll say, everyone now knows and believes that we didn't really land on the moon. I said, Mike, I don't think everybody believes that. I think there's a lot of people that, well, besides that, everybody now knows and believes that the CIA was responsible for killing President Kennedy. They're the ones that pulled the trigger. I said, Mike, they just released all these JFK documents and there's no proof of that. I said, so I don't know who the everyone you're talking about is, but it's not me. Sure, is there reason to question the CIA about some of the information that came out? Sure. Can we, without question, say that, the CIA killed President Kennedy? No, there's no proof of that. Maybe there's some more investigation that needs to be done even now. But, it's just like you said about the Twin Towers. Well, they only came down because they exploded from the inside. That structural steel is so strong, it'll never be weakened by a jet fuel fire. The government did that. I just get upset when people read something. I think there's a bias that people have. I don't want to call it the conspiracy theory bias because there's a real name for that bias. I can't recall.
Confirmation bias.
Confirmation bias. They go in at something with believing or wanting it to be true, and then they read something that's written or something presented on the internet, whether it's video or written, and they jump right in it because that's what they've already suspected, and this is their verification or their confirmation. It's really irritating, and the biggest thing for me, and I tell my brother this all the time, all it does is make you seem like a less serious, less credible individual. Why would you want to do that to yourself?
Yeah, exactly. And the bad thing is about Reels and even YouTube video, but Reels I noticed on Facebook is worse. It keeps feeding you that information.
Yes.
That false information. It keeps going, whether it's Buzz, you mentioned Buzz Aldrin landing on the moon. Brent sends me this thing where Buzz Aldrin said, well, we didn't do it. And it's a short clip. And I said, Brent, do you know what he really said there? A little girl asked him about worst case scenario. And he said, well, we didn't do that. We didn't have that. So they just cut the video. And now all of a sudden they say, well, he said we weren't landing on the moon. No, it's not. They didn't have a worst case scenario. Yeah. But you have to look at videos in full context. Anytime you see somebody else, how they sit there and they point like this at the video, right. Or, sometimes it's okay. But, sometimes it's like, wait, why am I seeing you talking about this particular video instead of seeing the video coming out as its own thing? If it's real, and I said to Brent and Joe, I said, if any of this stuff is real, that you guys said, do you think the news media, the main news media, wouldn't be talking about it? And it's a cover-up. I said, no, news media is driven by advertising dollars. What happened when the Pentagon released the Tic Tac and the gimbal video of UFOs? every news station carried it because they were getting advertising dollars for hyping it up.
Right.
And if you know more about it now, we may have a better understanding of what those things were. But I could talk about that for another half hour. So we won't go there. Um, but yeah, it's just, you mentioned credibility. I told these guys, I said, when you're talking to other people, if you talk about this kind of stuff, the average halfway intelligent person, you're going to lose credibility in their eyes because they're going to say, you're a nut,
Yeah.
you know? And it could be true about
Well,
politics too.
I think the challenge to our friends, our relatives, and the people we don't know, just what you said. If you hear something that sounds like it's something you want to believe, do your research, check it out. Now, you don't need to go down to the grains of sand kind of research that Mike Kelly does, but just getting down to the gravel level will probably tell you whether or not something's right or wrong or true or false.
Yeah.
But don't go running off at the mouth with some half-cocked cockamamie idea.
Well, that's what I said. You go in the past, we used to go to Google. Well, you can be misled by Google, and you might have the first 10 results on a page, like especially on a political thing, all agreeing, especially if it's against a Republican. So I said, what you want to do is go to Grok because Grok, it'll research 25 pages right away and X posts. And it'll analyze it in less than a minute and get back to you with the conclusion. You could spend 2 days researching what Grok can do in 2 minutes.
Right.
And it's not just that. You can hit this little link in Grok. If you really want it to go deep, it says deep think. That'll search 350 pages.
Well,
It's amazing. And it'll even show you what it's looking at. And it's just on that screen. It's like it's going by so fast. So, yeah, anytime your spidey sense goes off and you say, well, maybe this isn't true, or maybe I should listen to an alternate point of view. So, one thing we stopped doing in politics too is we stopped listening to each other.
that's true.
It
Yeah.
used to be we could agree on what the problems were and just disagree on how to fix them,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Because problems are obvious. We were in the military. My boss always said, don't come to me with a set of problems. Come to me with a set of solutions because everybody can see the problem, right?
Right.
But now we are to the point where we can't even agree on what the problem is.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate that we have problems in the United States. In the past, people like Tip O'Neill and Ronald Reagan, they could work together. Once the election was over and the political part of it was already decided, they could work together to solve problems. And now we don't do that. Even something, as you noted earlier, something as simple as men competing in women's sports, where America is 80% against that. Um, One group of politicians voted as a bloc against that. Not one single politician crossed the aisle and I think that's a shame because everyone can see there's so many examples of where that is and can be a problem. So look, how's your 401k doing?
I don't have a 401k, but I have mutual fund investments.
Okay, well, mutual fund investments.
Yeah,
What I'm getting at is,
they're down.
30 days ago when everyone everywhere was talking about how bad the tariffs were and people are going to pay through the nose and we can't afford anything now and that dastardly Donald Trump. Well, his negotiations are working. I just wanted to give that kind of update. What is there, 90 nations that are standing outside the White House door waiting for their turn to come in and renegotiate a new fair trade deal?
Yeah, I think it's over 100 now.
Yeah. And, the one nation that is not doing it is China. And to be perfectly honest with you, I'm not sure that we should care about China. We should care about whether or not we get their manufactured product because what they don't make. Here's the thing about a capitalist economy. If you want something, it's that build a better mousetrap and the world will be the path to your door. If we're not getting a Chinese made product, fill in the blank, whatever it is. Somebody in the United States will figure out how to fill that void. They'll figure out how to make the product that people want to buy, and they'll come at it with a price that people will. It's the same thing you used to say about illegal immigrants. Well, if we don't have illegal immigrants, who's going to pick our strawberries, and who's going to pick our fruit, and who's going to pick our lettuce? And you know what? The economic system we have called capitalism is self-healing. Okay, maybe we won't have people who will pick strawberries for 20 cents a quart, or 50 cents a quart, whatever they get for that. But guess what? They'll get somebody to pick strawberries for $2 a quart. And when you go to the store to buy strawberries, the price that you purchase that you pay for it will reflect the fact that it costs more to pick them. And guess what? People will still buy strawberries. That's the beauty of a capitalist society. And, so when people, now, a good friend of mine, I just had this argument with him last week. We were sitting down at the coffee shop for a cup of coffee, and he was complaining. Yeah, but this is more expensive, and that's more expensive, and I can't afford it. I said, to begin with, you're paying less for gas, right? Yeah, I am. You're paying less at the grocery store. Yes, I am. So what you're complaining about are more durable goods for the most part that are made in China. Yeah. Well, I want to buy them at the old price. That's so dumb. Long term, it's going to reinvigorate manufacturing in the United States, which means more good paying, family sustaining jobs. Are you against that? See, that's what people did. They don't look past their nose. They don't look past the next 30 days. And it's frustrating. But anyways, I think the tariff, the threats, and the reality of increased tariffs are working. Did you see the Democrats want to take away the president's power to negotiate tariffs or set tariffs?
Yeah, I saw that. And, it's interesting, and I'll be brief because we're under 4 minutes now. I did some number checking yesterday using Grok, and whoever thinks that we're going to replace the income tax with tariffs, you're totally wrong, because we imported $4 trillion a year of goods. And if you import tariff tax that at 10%, you're looking at $400 billion a year. This government doesn't run, it runs on $7 trillion a year. You're never going to get rid of taxes so whoever's saying that, now you could reduce it, but what we're trying to do is reduce the trade deficit, because while we import 4 trillion, we only export $3 trillion a year dollars in products. But that's a $1 trillion loss every year.
But if we make more here, Mike, that'll offset.
Oh, I'm not saying that. No, I think tariffs are good. I just get rid of the idea that it's going to get rid of your income tax or taxes in general. It's not going to happen.
Maybe what it will do is give enough back to the coffers that the federal government collects so that they can do away with taxes on Social Security.
That's right.
And tips. Maybe that's the goal. I don't know.
Yeah, that's doable. Yeah.
What I don't understand is when we instituted those taxes, if we eliminated taxes on tips, if we eliminated taxes on Social Security, and we eliminated taxes on overtime, what does that do? That encourages people to be productive. That encourages people, on the Social Security side, you're really taxing the most vulnerable of members of our society, and they're the ones that can least afford, especially with the rising rate of inflation that we have and the cost of living. But on the tip side and the overtime taxes, that incentivizes people to work harder instead of sitting at home collecting unemployment or welfare.
Or working 2 jobs.
That incentivizes them to go out and work, and isn't that a good thing? And I don't understand why people would be against it. That's all.
Yeah, I hear you, brother. And there's another guy, and we have 1 minute and 20 seconds left, but somebody mentioned about getting rid of the withholding tax. So,
that's great.
Well, not getting rid of it, but making individuals pay for it at the end of the year.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, we know what we're paying in taxes, because when they withhold it, It's like you don't see it.
Yep. Yep.
I guess another idea is to not have tax on the first $50,000 a person earns.
That's another
You know,
way.
that helps the poor and the middle class.
Yep.
So there's a number of ideas.
Really been hurt over the last few years, Mike. We've destroyed the middle class as we've exported jobs overseas. And the middle class is really the rung on the ladder that we need so that people can move from the right up the economic level. So that's a shame that this has happened to us. And I applaud President Trump for doing what he's doing.
Yeah, looks like we're out of time, my friend.
All righty, brother. Mac and Mike.
Out.